A wise man once said, "The future is an unknown, but a somewhat predictable unknown." To look to the future, we must first look back upon the past, because that is where the seeds of the future were planted. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. That quote shared is the wisdom of Albert Einstein. And as it did for me, I hope that it would also for you help you to understand the importance of preparing today for the future. The future may not be entirely predictable, but we each of us have a key role to play in shaping the future, and so that we might persuade the future to what it should look like. So even without a crystal ball, we are not entirely taken by surprise, and that we can, to some extent, know what to anticipate. It was in that spirit that the 2024 ICDE Leadership Summit took place from the 5th to the 7th of June in Geneva. The theme of the summit was navigating the future of higher education with AI. And for those of you who have been in higher education for as many years as I have, you will notice this little tale that has now been added to almost every discussion for years. And I think my panel will agree with me. We spoke about navigating the future of higher education, full stop. Leadership in higher education, full stop. Technology in higher education, full stop. Today, we're all talking about the future of higher education in this age of technology and with AI. Higher education institutions globally are being confronted with the rapid advancement of technology and particularly artificial intelligence. And what we're seeing more and more and more is the critical need for change management. What that change management means in this era of AI, I'm not sure that any of us really knows. Therefore, understanding how to navigate AI in higher education, as well as leading higher education in the era of AI, are actually two sides of that same coin. And how we spend this coin will be key to ensuring that higher education institutions can be prepared for the challenges, that they're able to harness the opportunities and the benefits of technology and AI, leading to more resilient and future-ready systems. I'm going to admit up now, I'm not a tech evangelist. I'm not sure about the future with AI, but I'm not a technophobe either. And so my panel is going to understand that very quickly from me, that the questions, the discussions, I'm hoping, will be robust and that they will harness all sides of the AI debate. The discussions at the ICDE Summit, Ebba, you were there, Amélé, you were there, Santiago, you were there, and I think you will agree with me. They were robust, they were honest, they were a little bit scary at times as we realized the unpredictability of what might be coming our way. Santiago Bellomo was at the summit, as I said, and he's one of the authors of the Policy Dialogue report that has been launched post the summit discussions. I urge you all to please download the report. The QR code is on the screen. Please read the report, but please read the report once, twice, and then read it again. So many seeds were sowed during the summit. And it is now up to all of us, to each one of us, to decide which of the issues raised in those discussions will be relevant to our various institutions, will be apposite for our context. You will see, once you start reading the report, that it is not a one-size-fits-all framework for everyone to follow. Rather, it is really a challenge to our thinking towards a better AI future. So please, once again, I ask you, please download the report. Don't read it now. Don't read it now. Once the panel is over and you're sitting at home this evening considering what was said, because I know you will, read it then and choose those pearls of wisdom suitable for you. So, colleagues, our panelists this morning are Santiago Bellomo, Asha Kanwar, Ebba Ossiannilsson, and Amélé Ekué. And what they're going to help me do is to unpack that report, but also to help all of us move away from the notion of reactive higher education institutions to becoming more proactive as we look at preparing for this AI future. Santiago, I am going to start with you, and I'm going to ask you just in a few sentences, can you summarize the key takeaways from the report, and particularly those critical recommendations that we should ponder?
Well, thank you. Before addressing your question, I would like to acknowledge the committee, the editorial committee, and also appreciate Amélé and Fadi's invitation, bold invitation, I must say, because I'm a philosopher, and it's quite a courageous move to invite a philosopher to join a team. Everyone made significant contributions, and I feel I won't do enough justice to all the work. Let me start by a selection of what may be the main findings within the main findings. The first notable aspect was the diversity of universities and their contexts. And this may seem obvious, of course, but what was shocking was the magnitude of the diversity. For example, one Chinese open university mentioned that it was piloting AI tools for 5 online courses with 5,000 students each. The total enrollment of 10,000 students in these pilots exceeded the entire population of most of the universities present at the summit. The second finding was, let's say, the gap we noticed between the future expectations of AI contributions to higher education confronted to what we might say the real world present contributions. There was a huge gap there. For example, I had the chance to attend to all the sessions in what we call the praxis track, where I was supposed to hear about real world applications. And I was surprised about the fact that most of the presentations were theoretical reflections about future opportunities and risks that AI might confront us with. Another finding was that we all agreed in our high expectations about AI contributions, but also we shared a pervasive fear about the AI divide that was mentioned before in the panel. A fear encompassing not only inequality of access, but also of disparities on student outcomes, even among those of them who had access to technology. And let's say the fourth and last finding I would like to share is a philosophical one. Everyone agreed about the need of a human-centered education. But we didn't gain much clarity about this concept and what this concept means. And this is important because of over-representation of values and worldviews from dominant cultures, which poses a huge challenge when understanding in the practical sense what it means, it actually means to have a human-centered education. That's all for now, because I will extend too much. Remember, I'm a philosopher.
But Santiago, stay where you are, because the other question that I have is, with these findings, with our recommendations, so the recommendations have been put out there, do you think that universities are ready to implement the recommendations?
Yes and no. They are ready, but they should be aware of what they must commit to. So I find this is a personal, not it didn't appear in the summit, but I'm doing some research about university staff knowledge on AI, and the results are shocking. Not only in my country, in Argentina, but also during the summit, I had the chance to make a poll, and university staff is not quite aware of what AI really is and is capable of. So there's a gap of knowledge that we must address there, and we must do it urgently, because education leaders tend to arrive a bit late in terms of cultural transformation.
So what I am going to, given what we said, we keep talking about the what. We know the theoretical what's. I'm hoping that from this morning, we can look more at the how, those practical, those real experiences of what we would advise, how we think things should be done. So Amélé, I'm going to start with you. The report speaks about diversity. Santiago mentioned diversity. I think it was the third word that you used. Professor Carr this morning also spoke about diversity. How do you think we can build stronger and diverse networks to ensure ethical leadership and promote ethical AI? How do we do it, and what do we hope to achieve from these diverse networks?
Thank you, Divya, for this question. I think it brings us back to a foundational question that we need to ask about what do we want to achieve with education and higher education in particular. And I think this question of AI and higher education exacerbates these questions around diversity, and we shouldn't restrict it and narrow it to the sole understanding of diversity in terms of cultural diversity, for example, or linguistic diversity, but there is much more diversity to take into account. I'm thinking, for example, and this is something that occurs to me as a critical area, that there is something that I would call the deferment of phases in the encounter and in the engagement with how we deal with AI and emerging technologies in general in the educational sector. What I mean is that we are concerned differently in the use and deployments of these technologies and how we translate these meaningfully in our educational praxis. And so in that sense, I would build upon what Santiago shared, that it urges us to pose the pedagogical question afresh and think about diversity in a much broader sense. It's all about, of course, inclusivity. We are dealing with knowledge, with the transmission, but also the creation, the sharing of knowledge, but how we are doing this and how can technologies facilitate that. On the one hand, that would be the positive, affirmative strand, but on the other hand, where are the risks and how can we, by including as many stakeholders as possible, and I would say that is the organizational dimension of the question. How can we organize that as many people as possible who are part of the educational enterprise can be part of such a conversation? And I imagine that this would lead to something like a new normative consensus building. This question of AI and education is one of the key normative consensus building questions of our times, I believe.
And a forum like this is possibly a first step to building the diversity with a diverse network, but in an institution itself, would you see wider consultation? Because at the moment we have the board, the institution. In order to build the diversity and the understanding around it, who would be the stakeholders that you think we should be, or how different should we become?
Yes, absolutely. I think that higher education institutions are traditionally perhaps a little bit more inward oriented, focused on what shall be transmitted. And I think these times challenge to be more open, to be more permeable, to cross the boundaries and to seek partnerships also outside academia, private public partnerships, but also being creative and innovative in looking out for conversation partners where explicitly those topics can be tested and probed. So I think higher education needs to open itself more, going outside, identifying new avenues and new partners of conversation.
And here's a difficult one to the panelists, but this is just a yes/no answer. And I know it's not going to be easy. Does AI improve quality access to higher education for everyone? Does AI improve quality access to higher education for everyone in its current format? Yes or no? And we'll unpack it. I promise we will unpack. Asha? Asha's the one who said to me, why are you asking us that question? The answer is yes. And then just now she said to me, I'm not sure the answer is yes.
You know, now I'll take the academic way out. The answer is yes, but it depends. And what does it depend on? Give me just one minute. You know, if you look at the ITU figures and that access to internet connectivity globally is 70%. When you go to sub-Saharan Africa, it's 40%. And yesterday you saw, you know, from Stanley's prize-winning presentation, they're looking at how to generate electricity, you know, through wind power, through, you know, bottles, through everything. So are we going to leave, you asked the question, everyone, are we going to leave those people behind? The answer is no. So, and you also asked the question, how? How will we do it? And I'll be very brief that AI is not a silver bullet, but it has to be placed in its proper social, economic, and political context. And the solutions have to be tailored to specific constituencies before we can include everyone. So that's the short one.
I'll come back to you on that, Asha. Ebba, will AI improve quality access to higher education for everyone?
The short answer is yes from my side, but I will also take the opportunity to extend it a bit. First of all, we used to ask ourselves, what can AI do? But I will say that that is not the question we should only ask. We should ask the question, what do we want AI to do for us and for the people, and for people to be included for education, because education is a human right. and not leaving anyone behind. I will come back more to elaborate on that.
I will come.
Thank
Amélé?
you.
Join my colleagues in stating a nuanced yes. So I think that it is, for me, a qualitative question. We need to define what is the purpose of our educational endeavor, and technology cannot solve this or guarantee the access to quality education, but there needs to be real groundwork to be done, and a real educational vision in order to enable this.
Santiago?
You shouldn't ask yes/no questions to a philosopher.
Or
But-
to an academic panel. I realize my mistake.
But I'll try to stick to a point, and I would say, if you rephrase the question, can AI promote inclusion? Yes. Is it nowadays promoting inclusion? No.
Thank you so much. So, all of that said, Ebba, you said a fairly categorical yes, that it does do it. But we've heard again and again that AI, currently where we are using it, it is aggravating inequalities in higher education, and it is widening the digital divide. We always talk about that. In our current climate and preparing for the future, what should universities be doing? So we know the answer, but what is it that we should be doing to try to bridge that divide to ensure that we can harness AI for everyone's benefit?
To give you 30 seconds to think about your response, just as a reminder, if you have questions or if you want to answer the question that Divya posed, please enter your questions and comments into the QR code. Thank you.
First, again, we have to come back what Amélé was saying 2 times by now. What is education about? It goes back to the human rights, and education is a human right for everyone. That is very, very important to stress and to emphasize. That is not the case today. In higher education, as we are talking about that in our panel, it is sad to offer higher education to each and everyone on the planet who would like to go for higher education. You should open 1 university a day. We don't want that. It is not feasible. It is not desirable. We need to have other kind of solutions, not leaving anyone behind. And that also goes back to the Declaration of Human Rights. So first of all, ethical leadership in higher education is so much more than about just decision making. It is about shaping the future of education, the future we want. And we all know that UNESCO has done a lot of nice work on this, not at least the Agenda 2030 on the SDG 4, which have an impact on all the other SDGs. It is just 8 years to 2030. It is urgent. They have also shaped the future initiative about the futures of education, and the futures is in plural. And with a new social contract, what is education about? Education should be inclusive, sustainable, scalable, be trustworthy, to be relevant, and to be responsive to the challenges of our time. And one of our challenges is the development of AI, of course. And by embedding those values of care, quality, curiosity, resilience, and agility into the educational institutions, leaders can ensure that higher education can fulfill those transformative potentials, and that we can do that with empathic approaches, with caring approaches, with well-being approaches for education. And that goes back to your questions about inclusivity, because inclusiveness is also some kind of buzzword, and sometimes I really love it, and sometimes I really hate it, because can be everything and nothing. For me, and what we are discussing very much for the organization, what where I'm working for the ICDE, the International Council for Open and Distance Education, who hosted this conference in June, which was presented previously. It is very much about scalability. It is about sustainability, and inclusiveness is who do we include? And what are the requirements who we include? Who do we really invite to the table? Who do we really invite for the conversations we have? And in the educational sector, I will argue that we really need to learn to know our learners. We don't do that to that extent as we have to do. We can also see, for example, at this conference, we just talked with Fadi about it, there are no students here. Why? We need to, except for the award winners, of course, and you did an excellent work. I really would like to congratulate you again. But who do we invite to the table, to the conversations? Who do we invite, for example, in the rural areas? Quite often, institutions, universities, they think they are inclusive because they have that in the strategy, but they decide who will be invited to the conversations. I'll stop there for a while.
Asha, to pick up on something that Ebba said, and something we often do, we talk about inclusivity, we talk about leave no student behind, we speak about student equitability, and that's very common conversation when we're discussing AI. But just as we say leave no student behind, the conversation is now turning to leave no academic behind. What do you think the impact of AI on academics? Are our academics ready for a teaching and learning future with AI?
Do you want me to continue?
No, Asha, sorry.
Well, I mean, of course, we mustn't leave our students behind. And there are a lot of students behind in higher education. So just to add to what Ebba was saying, that, you know, the World Bank said that for any country to achieve sustainable development, they need 40% age participation rates in higher education. So globally, that's the figure. But in sub-Saharan Africa, it's below 10%. So how are we going to bring more people into higher education? And most governments, you know, we help them with developing policies, developed policies to establish dedicated single mode open universities. And Santiago mentioned one of the universities in China. The Open University of China has more than 1 million students. The Indira Gandhi National Open University in India has more than 1 million students. And it's very interesting that in the global north, open and distance learning is being offered with campus institutions, but in the global south, the governments are still establishing open universities. Now, this was democratization and massification of higher education for people who wanted it, but didn't have, you know, couldn't afford it, couldn't access it in remote areas. So they set up these universities, and the most recent one has come up in Kenya, the Open University of Kenya. But, you know, there were two things, you know, just to bring it back to AI, that were big problems. One was that the completion rates in open universities were very low, sometimes as low as 2%. So that gave a bad name to distance learning. And the second was that because the numbers were so huge, it was very difficult to give them personalized one-on-one student support. So now with AI, we have the opportunity to not just giving a one-size-fits-all curriculum for everybody, but to personalize education according to the needs. And the second thing which we can do is we can provide 24/7, you know, tutorial support using artificial intelligence. And the problem is that institutions still need guidelines on how to do it responsibly. The good news is that, you know, companies, last year, you remember when ChatGPT-4 came out, we sort of said, oh my goodness, now they're going, we have to pay for everything because that required a subscription. But this year, the good news is that the large language models are now being given out as open source, which means that now we can develop and use them. But what is happening in developing countries is that, for example, there's some large language model which was developed in California. You bring it to Hong Kong or to some institution in India. People are using it as is. So what is happening is that the biases which were introduced into those models originally by the original developers are now being replicated in different places because people don't have the capacity or the awareness to change it. So now to your question about what do we do with the faculty, I think there are courses available for CEOs on AI literacy. But I don't know of any course which is available for institutional heads or staff members. And here, as higher education folk, we can actually develop micro courses on AI literacy for both the heads of institutions, policymakers in ministries, and our teachers, and build the capacity so that they know what the pitfalls are of adopting these large language models, which are now free, and then sort of replicating those biases which are there.
Because what we're seeing a lot in the literature at the moment is when people talk about introducing technology and introducing AI, it's often a decision that's taken at a strategic level, and very little is done for faculty to help them, to guide them. And it's almost an ethical question again, whether on the one hand, students are getting the quality they deserve. We're being forced to apply these technology models, but the people who are required to do it are not exactly certain how to do it or what to put in place. But there's also a big discussion right now where faculty are beginning to talk about being overworked and overwhelmed by the change that's coming about. So if you were sitting or advising at the university level, Asha, what policies would you like to see either from a government or from a university itself in supporting both faculty as well as students with the introduction of AI?
Somebody was mentioning in the previous session that there are plenty of regulations, the UNESCO's ethics in AI guidelines give very good and clear recommendations. So there's no paucity of toolkits, tools, regulations available at the global or national levels. The problem is in the implementation. So we don't have to replicate the wheel and develop new guidelines. The guidelines are all there. Now we have to sort of use them. For example, UNESCO did a survey of 450 institutions globally. And they asked them, do you have any guidelines in your institution for how to use generative AI? Only 10% of those 450 institutions had those guidelines. So I think more needs to be done. There has to be more awareness. And one of the immediate things which I think institutions can do is, set up peer review boards within the institution. It's a very practical, simple solution. Put some people together and say that before we actually adopt and adapt any of these large language models which are coming out, let us actually review and see how they fit within our context and how we can localize.
So a kind of almost stepwise reflection as we do, let's reflect, as we do, let's reflect. Amélé, all of us, I think we've now agreed that equitable access is one of the ethical challenges. But just for us today, I am now promoting you to the Minister of Education. You choose the country that you want to be this Minister of Education in. Which two risks for higher education would you focus on to ensure that we don't eliminate innovation, but we ensure that the ethical compass keeps pointing due north? Apart from the inclusivity and equitable access, are there other ethical risks that you think we need to be aware of?
Yeah, I think that it brings me back to where I started. I think that there is a risk that we replicate the exclusion and different forms of exclusion that are already existent. And in that sense, I would say it's a true governance, it's a political question to ensure that this risk is appropriately addressed. I would say it's also a responsibility within the academic community to ensure that there are communities of learning, so to speak, that are diversely composed. And I think this is, as far as I can see, especially in countries where the digital divide is so large, is not given. We need to overcome the isolation and thinking beyond the compartments, the different sectors in higher education, and come more to a concerted conversation, both at national levels and internationally, on these topics, and how we can ensure that it is an effort that enables learners, but also, as you said, academics, to make a good use, a responsible use. And I couldn't omit speaking about ethical leadership and ethical education. And we have made very positive experience with our partners in different regions who try to investigate how do we teach ethics, and how can a different kind of methodology in ethics education contribute to capacity building. And I think their ethical awareness or ethical discernment are important keywords. So that, to my mind, is also another important shift that we probably need to make from providing and transmitting a kind of inventory knowledge, and coming more to the how, and how do we learn, but also how can we discern such situations that present potential risks. So this would be some ideas on the governance side, but also on the academic side and the praxis of education.
Do you think it'll help universities, for example, to have a common module for every single student on responsible use of AI? Is that something that we would want to think about, or is it, or are there more important topics that should become the signature module of institutions going forward?
I think that could be a very good idea. I think transparency and communication is very important, and we assume that we are all at the same pace with catching up with these developments, but it's so important to create spaces of conversation and of exchange on our diverse understandings. And I think that can help with this type of ethical consciousness or awareness I have spoken about, if, for example, such modules would be instituted, established, and further supported, indeed.
Almost feels like we planned this, and I promise we didn't, but you spoke about diverse understandings. And Ebba, we use terms very often like fairness with AI, transparency. I think you used inclusion. We speak about equity and AI. Do you really think that there is a shared understanding? Is there common understanding? That first, let's go with that. do we all understand it similarly, and particularly the leadership who need to make it happen?
Of course, all those words are very nice, and that sounds very nice, I think, for all of us. But sometimes they are really buzzwords. I think we have some kind of common understanding, but if we really would like to go deep into it and to really discuss what it is and what's in it for me, what's in it for me in my institution, what's in it for me in my country, what's in it for me in my region, etc., etc. I think we can, even in this room, have different kind of understanding what those words are about. So by saying that, I will build on what you were saying, Asha, about there are so many nice reports from UNESCO, from the European Commission, from OECD, from, I mean, a lot of those authorities around the globe. What I think is very important is to really try to understand what this is about and how this resonates where I am in my institution, with my students, for example, in my region. And that is a word, maybe also buzzword, but localization. I think it is very important to think global, because especially with AI, everything is so easy to collaborate and make partnership globally. And I think this is also really the key to move forward with not at least higher education. We have to do that much, much more. But we also need to localize it. Because what's in it for me? Because when you understand what's in it for me, then you are able to be responsible, to take actions, to have the mandate to make changes. And I think this is really, really important. So there need to be much more, as you were also saying, Amélé, about communication, about championships, about advocacy all the time, because all those changes which we may all like to have and which we all see are needed for the individuals and for the planet is always that it is people behind it. So people always come first, whatever kind of technology, whatever kind of things we're discussing, because change is made by people, for people. So there need to be allocated time for communications, for debates, for discussions. And that is really, really a leadership issue, I think. And that is also about ethical leadership. Leaders at all levels, macro level, meso level, micro level, have to take the responsibility to allocate time for people, academics, administration, students, all stakeholders involved, to take time to collaborate, to make changes, to debate, discuss, because again, change is made for people and by people. And I think this is really what is lacking today, because everything has to go so fast. And that is, of course, it does, but it is an investment. It is really an investment. And that is not always calculated in the budget for capacity building for the people and for the staff, together with the students. And students today, they are not students as consumers, they are co-creators of education. I think this is also very important to take into this maybe not new, but to take in this debate, that we have to work together with our students. And also, as I think it was said yesterday, that we think often as students as the coming leaders, but students are the leaders of today.
And just sticking with this issue around the AI risks, Asha, AI bias, I think it's a truism. It's something that we all know about, we've read about, we've experienced, whatever it might, but it's out there now. It's not a secret any longer. For higher education institutions, in the context of AI bias, what would your advice be? What are the things we need to be looking out for? What are the things we need to be careful about?
You know, there are several types of biases. It could relate to ethnicity, race, gender. So let me just focus on one, which is gender, the gender bias. So gender bias is still alive and well in our society. But it becomes much more dangerous when we allow these biases to, infiltrate the data and algorithms, because now we can amplify it hugely and make it even worse. So, the stereotypes, everything gets sort of replicated and amplified through technology. So it's very important that we tackle these biases at the very root. And if you look again, you'll say I'm quoting data, but in the field of AI, there's only 30% women. And out of that 30%, only 5% are in leadership positions. And if you look at all the companies, the big AI companies, they are all headed by males. And it's not as if they are against women, but right now, they are thinking of, how to compete with the next person and develop the next technology. So they don't have the time to think about these little bits about that, oh, what are women going to say and what are women going to be disadvantaged? So I think we need more women around the table. And in fact, this year, there was a new IBM report which came out in April, in which 70% of European business leaders who said that we need, 70% of them said that we need more women in decision-making, processes, so that when we make decisions about AI, they are able to bring the feminist perspective or the women's perspective into it, so that we avoid those biases which are getting replicated in artificial intelligence. And then, the other stereotype we have that in the West, women are all very well represented. But it's very strange because one of the other data which came out, which was very interesting, is that 23% women in France were around the table in decision-making processes for AI. United Arab Emirates, 41%. And, we say, okay, they've got the whale, so they're not making a difference. But, this is the way we perpetuate stereotypes. So it was very interesting for me to see that. And what they were saying is that the reason why there are fewer women is because the pipeline from the STEM discipline, from the school level, is not, bringing enough women into the scientific stream. So one of the suggestions, of course, is that bring more women and leaders who will mentor other women, encourage more girls to enter STEM subjects, etc., so that, by the time they come to higher education, they are able to pursue. And then they should have better female policies for families, because a lot of women leave when they have children, and then they're always disadvantaged when they come back. So if you have good family policies, it's a very good report. So if people want to read it, but this is how we can eliminate the biases.
And Asha, you spoke about the biases, but you also spoke about, and in your first sentence, it is dangerous. It is serious because it is exclusionary rather than inclusive as we want. So do you think we should consider a moratorium on AI, given the potential for bias, until we have resolved the issues in higher education?
But who is going to be that, that super special entity that the world will listen to? I think even within the country, there will be not kind of, even if there is a regulatory body, it's so difficult for them to get the institutions that report to them to listen to them. So globally, I wish we were living in a utopia where everything would be, good. But the point is that each person can make a difference. And that's the point to start, rather than waiting for some top level person to, crack the whip and say, now go and do this.
So Santiago, I'm going to come back to you now. You've listened to the panel. You were involved in writing the report. Can you see any of your recommendations in the panel discussion? And I'm going to ask you maybe to share with us some of the recommendations, and also, but to just pick up where there is alignment or disalignment even between the report and what the panel says.
Thank you. There surely is an alignment, and that's an easy one, I think. Within the 10 recommendations you can find in this nice report, another one from Globethics. My favorite ones are the following. First, promote situated innovation. And that sounds like the word locally that you used, Ebba. It implies recognizing and valuing the conditions, the initial conditions of your institution, and setting expectations that align the real possibilities and the aspirations of the universities. As was mentioned, there's no one-size-fits-all solution for AI implementation. My second favorite recommendation is to promote and foster incremental approach to AI innovation. This implies following a gradual plan and making small-scale pilots, unless you are the Chinese open university with more than 1 million students. This, in a way, assures that staff keeps motivated in a way, and on the other way, you prevent from frustration that comes along with this gap between the expectation and the real possibilities. The third recommendation would be to design a risk plan so that you can assure that the core values and the core mission of your institution is delivered. And for example, if you don't have enough experience in AI implementation, maybe you should start with administrative processes before going to teaching and learning processes. And the last one, and it comes along with the idea of leadership that was focal in the meeting, is to avoid techno-solutionism. This is the idea that, in a way, the problems emerging from AI application and EdTech application in general can be solved with more AI and more technology. And we found during the summit about the importance of leadership. Leadership is a good leadership. It understands the complexity involved in AI application. Good leadership is able to, as it was mentioned, to develop change management with its cultural dimension. And ethics, as Amélé mentioned, involves commitment with ethics and values, so that we avoid the biases that AI presents us.
Santiago, on that last one on leadership, the new leadership, and I can't agree with you more, and I think everybody's been saying the same thing. How do we get higher education leaders to understand that they need to start looking at leading differently? This is a new world happening. What do we need to do?
That's an excellent question. I would like to recall Mark Nichols, the president of the ICDE, introduced a metaphor during the summit concerning AI eruption in higher education. It's like an elephant bursting into a room, he said. And I find this metaphor very suggestive, and I would like to take advantage of it. On the one hand, AI is like an elephant making a lot of mess. It creates disorder, uncertainty, confusion. So the first challenge for university leaders is to embrace confusion, uncertainty, disorder as a necessary step towards AI innovation. And this is very hard for universities, because we are used to be seen the ones who have certainty, who have a clarity and rigorous science about any subject. On the other hand, the metaphor tells us about an elephant that has a great power, huge power, and is able to pull heavy loads, even heavier than the ones that human beings can pull. But it is a brute force. So whatever intelligent AI might be, it is not intelligent enough to promote situated innovation, an incremental approach, to understand the complexity of AI innovation. That's where intelligent and ethical leaders do the difference, because human intelligence is the one who is capable to understand AI contributions and risks and deal with all of them in a transformative situation.
And coming to the human element of it, Amélé, a term that's often used, or sometimes, don't know how often, but is techno-balance. Balancing the technology with the human spirit, with humanity, with the human being. So if we've all, and I've heard this from all of us here, that the human being is still important as we look at AI and we look at AI in higher education. So what do you think? How do we preserve, how do we enhance a more human-centric approach when implementing AI technologies, instead of saying AI will solve the problem? How should universities be promoting this? What do we need to take into account?
Yeah, I would first say that I would not speak of human-centric, but I would, or human-centered, but I would speak of human-sensitive. And by saying so or nuancing it in this way, I think that we need also as humans have this critical introspection. And I think that comes to bear, especially in this topical area. And in the praxis of education and higher education, it's really to ask the question of what it means to be human and to be able to translate that into adequate measures, be it in the administrative, more procedural context, or be it in the more pedagogical realm of affairs. But I think that it's an opportunity, I would formulate it in this way, it's an opportunity for higher education institutions to perceive learning not only as learning outside, but also as learning inside, namely learning as institutions, how one can change the approach to organize and facilitate learning, but also research. We have spoken of the many opportunities to increase knowledge, also through technologies and AI, and to diversify the contributions if we have the capacities to discern and to offer that leadership. And that's why I would say a whole person education is necessary to develop these capacities and to make meaningful decisions.
Thank you. And so, Asha, if we look at AI in higher education, very often it's not the institutions developing it. We're buying systems, we're getting systems from outside. What role do you think that the universities or higher education institutions can play in ensuring this culture of transparency, the human sensitive approach that Amélé speaks about? Is there a way in which that universities and institutions of higher learning can in fact influence the big tech developers towards becoming more human sensitive in their approach?
You know, when they put out the large language models as open source, as many of them have done recently, the universities have that option of adapting and adopting and building their own chatbots based on their own courses. So that programming is possible. But also the role of the teacher is changing, like what we are talking about, you know, like earlier the teacher was the great sage on the stage. Now the teacher and the machine are in sync. And many people are calling it the hybrid augmented intelligence, where machine and human bring out their best attributes to work together for the best student outcomes among the children. And it's very interesting. One of the students said that, AI is also changing the power relationship between the teacher and the student, because now the student is GPT empowered. So what is the role of the professor? The professor becomes the guardrail of knowledge and helps that GPT empowered student to tell the good from the bad and the right from the wrong and so on. So I think it's possible. And the other thing is that to remember is that we are from a different generation, the second millennials. Our students are the third millennials, Generation Z, Generation Z, Generation Alpha, and they have a different way of learning. For them, a smartphone is an extension of the body. It's a symbiotic relationship. It's not something which you can tell them that leave it at the gate of the school and come in. It's very much part of their, it's like an extension of the human body. So how do we second millennials reinvent our ways to deal with the third millennials who have a completely different way of learning from how we learned?
Thank you. Interesting one. Any member of the panel. Are people infused by dominant culture able to reinvent themselves in order to guide responsible innovation? And I think that is something that we do see very often. It is very much the dominant culture that is putting out the new models there. Are they able to reinvent? Are they able to think differently? Are they able to put themselves into the shoes of others? And how? And I think that comes back, Asha, to your question also. If in higher education we're dealing with models that are being developed by dominant culture, how do we ensure, Ebba, that context is still key, that people understand the importance of being contextually relevant? You spoke about globalization. We call it globnacalization, global, national, and local. So that's where you could, how do we balance that? Ebba, any thinking?
First of all, thank you for that one, the person who raised the question, because it's really, really important and relevant. It is a problem. It is really a problem because a lot of what is going on in education today is coming from the nominating countries, and quite often from the West side countries and the global North. And that is really, really a problem, because what those countries or regions are doing doesn't resonate in the global South. I see myself very much how this is really a problem, because I'm working with open education resources and sharing the ICDE global campaign about open education resources and open education, and a lot of those open and free resources are developed by the dominate countries and the dominating professors, and that resonated not at all in the global South. So again, it is what I started to talk about. Who do we invite for the conversations? Who are invited in the room? Who are invited to the table to take part in those important discussions? But I can also see, and I'm an optimist, but I see that more and more those voices are more and more heard, and also represented at conferences, for example, to really try what we are doing with ICDE, for example. At our conferences, we always have representatives from all the 6 regions globally, and also to the gender perspective, and I mean, all these kind of perspectives which we talked about. It is so important to have different kind of perspectives, because no one size fits all, but each of us can make a difference where we are in our institution, in our region, in our country. So just, I mean, no answer, just saying that we have to try our best, all of us, to make all the voices heard.
And I'm looking at Amélé and I know she has something to say.
Yes, indeed, because I think that it's a continuation of a discussion that we had in the pre-AI era already. How can we ensure representation in how we create and share knowledge? And there are a few very encouraging examples that I'm currently following in Canada, for example, or in New Zealand, with indigenous communities working together with academics of other contexts, but also with the industry in how to ensure that, for example, indigenous knowledges serve in designing AI programs. And so I think that these are very concrete and encouraging examples that we should seek to foster also in our circles, learned bodies, associations, and make that visible. It's about visibility of those contributions. And then I think we can balance it out, speaking about the risk and what we want to do against them, and contributing to developing positive impact.
I think it's coming through. It's come through in the questions here also. Why do we have so many, how so few students in the discussion? Ebba, you said it, everyone said it. When we're talking about students, we have academics in the room here today, yet we're not talking about the impact of AI on the academic person. We're letting the academics talk about it for the students. And it's the diversity of the engagement, of the consultation, I think that needs to come through. And step one, we're on our way with it there. But Santiago, I want to ask you, from the audience, somebody asked, why would anyone go to university when they can have a teacher in their pocket with the IQ of Einstein?
Well, that's an excellent question. And well, I've delivered some conferences about this subject, and I will try to introduce a different perspective. You know, I believe that AI is a game changer in education. Of course it is. However, I feel there is an overestimation. It is overrated in a bit. Why I say this? Many scholars have said that, particularly one from a University of California, LLMs are stochastic parrots. They are, in a way, they are learning to talk like human beings, but are not human beings. They don't understand anything that is being written or said, even by them. I use the words "them" by it. We say hello to the machine while we write. We say thank you, but we are trapped in a kind of simulation about AI powers. It's a machine, a wonderful machine. I don't think it will be replacing teachers, and I would need a long conversation about this subject. But I really think that what we need today is better scholars, better academics, better teachers. Because if we have teachers that do simply what a machine can do, then they will be replaceable. But they should not be replaceable, and so we need them to understand what are the capacities of AI in order to make this blend. Some people call them the cyborg and the centaur metaphors about the blending of human capacities and machine learning. So we need to transform teaching, but not to replace it. I think I should go along, but for a matter of time, I can't.
You've started the conversation and it links to something else that we were talking about. We need to transform teaching. The conversation here is on emotional intelligence and critical thinking as well. So Ebba, can I have your view on it, and then Asha yours before we close the session? Ebba?
This is a new question.
How do we transform teaching the issues around critical thinking, emotional intelligence, or the response that you want. I saw your hand go
Yes.
up.
I raised my hand earlier on because I think this question was the previous one. It is connected to the new one as well, but it is important to for universities to stay relevant. And that's one way that's why it is important to discuss about this transformation. What is the role of universities? It is so much more than the education, the professional development, and the degree, the exams, etc., etc. I mean, we all know about that. It is so much more. It is so much about social, emotional, ethical growth, and to grow as an individual, to grow as an active citizen. And we also see very much, for example, students who have been involved in volunteer work in student unions, for example, or other kind of students' work. They used to become quite high on the career in different kind of positions in society. It is not because they have become a nurse or a teacher. It is because the volunteer work they have done during the university time. And I think this is really, really important to stress when we're talking about the transformation. What is education, universities about? And we also saw that very clearly during the COVID time. Everyone wanted to go back to the universities. In Sweden, where I come from, we didn't close down, and we were very criticized about that in the beginning. In the end, we were, yes, you said it, but because it is so important to be in this kind of community and for universities to be in the academia community, to be part of the conversations, to be part of democracy, etc., etc. So this must be maybe stressed and emphasized much more, and also the interdisciplinary discussions we have, because the problems we face today is cannot be solved by one discipline, not one institution, not one country. They are so complex, they need to be solved by interdisciplinarity. So universities who understand that will stay. Otherwise, the other ones maybe it's not relevant any longer.
Thanks, Ebba. Okay, and on that high note, the conversation will continue. When I started this morning, I started with the wisdom of Einstein, and I'm now going to end with the wisdom of Africa. It is said that in Africa, an antelope wakes up every morning knowing that it must outrun the fastest lion, or else it will be eaten. In Africa, a lion wakes up every morning knowing that it must outrun the slowest antelope, or else it will go hungry. Whether you see yourself as a lion, or whether you see yourself as an antelope, when the sun comes up, you'd better be running. Thank you to my panel, and thank you to everybody.